It is February and there's so much cloud around. Sticking with the largely cloudy skies as we go through the evening and through much of the night, but perhaps some greater, clearer skies developing for a time and a bit of rain pushing into the far southwest as well. More cloud to come as we go through later on this week, though we could see a bit of rain pushing in from the southwest. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long queues heading west towards Glasgow do continue on the M8. The inside lane is closed off from junction 14 to 15, where a lorry's broken down as you head towards the Kingston Bridge. And in South Yorkshire, no change in Sheffield city centre. The A61 Sheffield Parkway remains closed between the Park Square roundabout and Derek Dooley Way, and all approaches to the Park Square roundabout is closed as this investigation since last night continues, and the tram is also affected through the area. On the M6 on Merseyside, a lane's closed on the southbound entry slip at junction 23 at Haydock, where a lorry's broken down. The M20 in Kent is blocked heading towards London from junctions 6 to 4. The Maidstone to the Leybourne exit after a car and a van collided, and in Somerset, the A371 Wells Road at Shepton Mallet, that's closed following an accident. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck!
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jubes and Co. Coming up tonight, a High Court ruling says that so-called bad apple police officers cannot be sacked via vetting removal. Instead, they're going to have to be put on paid leave. Some are saying that this is a dark day for policing. Is it or not? And 50 years ago today, a glass ceiling was well and truly smashed to smithereens. We got our First Lady Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Was she a force for good then, do you think, or not? And another day, another poll putting reform on top. So the calls to unite the right are growing stronger and stronger. Your thoughts on that? And if it was united, what would it look like? And do you remember the tough images from the deportation flights last night carrying the migrants? So many of you got in touch and said, Michelle, details, details, details. All right, I listened to you, and I've got a few details now. A private flight chartered, it had about 47 people on board. It went to Albania and it cost us taxpayers about £1 million. So, is that a good deal or not? We've got all of that and more. Keeping me company tonight, my panel, we've got Ben Habib, the chairman of the Great British PAC and former deputy leader of Reform UK, and Scarlett Maguire, the political commentator. But before we get stuck in, let's give you your 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you very much. The top stories. The National Police Chiefs Council spokesperson says police officers and staff should always be held to the highest standards, and we must ensure that only those who are suitable to wear the uniform enter and remain in policing. Well, those comments come as the High Court ruled the Met Police cannot dismiss officers by removing their vetting clearance. Sergeant Lino Di Maria successfully mounted a legal challenge after having his vetting removed over sexual assault allegations, which he denies. He was found to have no case to answer in respect of the allegations and argued that having his vetting removed without the accusations being proved is a breach of his right to a fair trial. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said the force will be seeking an appeal on the judgment. In other news, 2 bodies found in a river in Aberdeen have been identified as those of sisters Eliza and Henrietta Hutsey, who went missing in January. The sisters, both aged 32, were last seen on CCTV on Market Street at Victoria Bridge over the River Dee. Police also say there do not appear to be any suspicious circumstances. Chelsea footballer Sam Kerr, who called a Metropolitan Police officer stupid and white in January 2023, has been found not guilty of causing racially aggravated harassment. The Australian international made the comments to PC Stephen Lovell during an incident in southwest London. She said she regretted the way she expressed herself, but added, "I feel the message was still relevant." Ms Kerr denied using whiteness as an insult and claimed, "I believed it was him using his power and privilege over me because he was accusing me of being something I'm not." Elsewhere, Labour officials were warned about offensive WhatsApp group messages before the comments were made public, it's been claimed today. Burnley MP Oliver Ryan's the second MP to be suspended by Labour. Greater Manchester Police said a non-crime hate incident had been recorded after the comments emerged, and former Health Minister Andrew Gwynn was sacked. Gerald Cooney, the former Labour leader of Tameside Council, said he raised concerns about Gwynn's remarks several times in the past year. Labour sources said no formal complaint had been received about the WhatsApp group. Baroness Jackie Smith spoke to GB News.
Nasty party. What we are is the decisive party. When the Prime Minister got the evidence of these messages, which I agree with you are completely unacceptable, what he did was to sack the Minister and to suspend from the Labour Party both of the MPs that were involved. Now, that stands in pretty stark contrast with previous Prime Ministers who faffed about the place and allowed senior ministers to stay in their roles when they had clearly breached the ministerial code. That's the difference that we're seeing.
In other news, Israel's Prime Minister says the Gaza ceasefire will end if the terror group Hamas does not return Israeli hostages by midday on Saturday. Benjamin Netanyahu warned of intense fighting if hostages are not released. Well, his comments echo those of US President Donald Trump, who earlier said the Israel-Hamas ceasefire should be cancelled if hostages held in Gaza are not returned on time. Hamas announced last night that they'll delay hostage releases planned for Saturday until further notice. Luis Rubiales has told a court he's absolutely sure Spanish footballer Jenny Hermoso gave consent before he kissed her at the Women's World Cup final in 2023. The former president of the Royal Spanish Football Federation is on trial accused of sexual assault and attempting to coerce Miss Hermoso into publicly saying the kiss had been consensual. Giving evidence, the 47-year-old said the kiss was an act of affection, adding that in the moment it was something completely spontaneous. And Sir Alex Ferguson led the tributes to Denis Law as the football community paid their final respects, saying he was one of the greatest players ever at Man United. Ferguson, the former Manchester United manager, was in attendance alongside several other United greats, including Ruud van Nistelrooy and Paul Scholes. Hundreds of fans and members of the public also paid their respects, lining the streets as the hearse drove past. And Old Trafford projected a tribute to the late footballer. Law remains the only Scottish player to have ever won the Ballon d'Or, and no man has scored more goals for the national team. He died at the age of 84 last month. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that, Tatiana. My name's Michelle Dewberry. This is Jubes and Co, and we're keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel, Ben Habib, the chairman of the Great British PAC, and he's, of course, also the former deputy leader of Reform UK. And alongside him, we've got Scarlett Maguire, the former Labour advisor. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And if you're sitting there thinking, what is a Great British PAC? Well, guess what? You should have tuned in the other day because he explained it at length, didn't you?
I did. Thank you.
There you go. You're very, very welcome. All of you are very welcome tonight. What is on your mind? You can join the conversation all the usual ways. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. Go to the website, gbnews.com/yoursay. Tweet or X me or follow me. Take me with you. Let me do a bit of stalking in your eardrums because, of course, we are on DAB+ radio. What a treat. But look, top story of the day. There's been many people debating and discussing a ruling that came in today and the impact that it potentially has on police officers. Some people are calling it a very dark day for policing. Well, let's cross live then, shall we, to our home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, bring us up to speed with what exactly has happened.
Well, this is an issue around the Metropolitan Police and other police forces effectively trying to clean up house to ensure that those officers within the service are not or are, all of them at least, fit and proper to hold the rank of a police constable and have no skeletons in their closet, if you like, that requires them to be dismissed. This all, of course, follows the murder of Sarah Everard in 2021 by the serving police officer PC Wayne Couzens and a slew of other allegations since that really have resulted in the Metropolitan Police in particular receiving an absolute reputational kicking. A review by Baroness Casey described the Metropolitan Police as not only institutionally racist, but also misogynistic and homophobic. And so since then, there's been a lot of soul-searching, internal processes, an operation which has really aimed to look at all those currently serving within the police service to just check their past and to vet them again to make sure, as I say, that they're fit and proper to hold that post. And this particular individual, a sergeant called Lino De Maria, was found to have a number of allegations that had been made against him of rape, sexual assault, claims that he'd also sent inappropriate messages to colleagues at work. So the police decided to revoke his vetting and institute the process to dismiss him. He has appealed that. He's gone to the High Court. There was a judicial review granted. The findings of that judicial review come back and they've said effectively that this officer is right, that his human rights were being infringed under Article 6 of the Human Rights Act because he wasn't allowed due process. He wasn't allowed to present his side of the argument to rebut any of the allegations, and that the Metropolitan Police and other forces are acting outside of the law here in the way that they are operating with these dismissals if people fail the vetting process.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just trying to look at the opposite side of this because I mean, a lot of people are divided on this, but it has been called a dark day for policing. So if you've got a situation where you've got a serving officer, someone's then made some allegations about him, you know, he's done this, he's done that, he's done the other, whatever. Surely, though, you wouldn't essentially fire that person until you've investigated and that person has been proved guilty. So now, in this new world, would that person be put on, say, desk duty while those investigations were taking place?
Well, there's a range of options that the police have available to them depending on what the allegations are. And at the end of the day, you know, the allegations may be proved and they could be disciplined, a verbal warning, they could be suspended for a while, and ultimately they could be sacked as well. But in terms of the process, what effectively has been happening is that, you know, if you apply to join the police, you have to go through a vetting procedure. They look into your criminal past, they look into your finances, your family and your associates, just to try to check that you are a fit and proper person to become a police officer. If they look upon some of the aspects of your character and your past behaviour as being someone who they consider to be of bad character, you don't get into the police service in the first place. The difficulty comes when you're accepted and you're in employment. Then you're subject to employment laws as well and protected supposedly by employment laws. But they continue to vet officers on a regular basis during their career. But if they find that there are aspects then of their character through further vetting that shows that they are perhaps not fit and proper, you've got to go through the proper procedure to get rid of them. And if you're going outside of those procedures and trying to sack them because of what the vetting procedure has turned up, then you get what we've got today with the judicial review saying that person's rights were infringed here. What it requires is a change in the law to toughen up the rules around what police can and can't do if they find that you are failing the vetting procedure. Successive Home Secretaries have been asked repeatedly to toughen up the rules here by Chief Constables. They've all failed to do that. Finally, we're hearing that the Labour government is going to go down the path of toughening up those rules so that Chief Constables, like the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, can sack people if they fail their vetting tests.
Interesting stuff. Mark White, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed with that. What do you think to this at home then? Are you sitting there thinking this all basically makes sense? Is this a step in the right direction, a step in the wrong direction? Let's hear from Metropolitan Police Chief then, shall we? Mark Rowley.
Today's ruling on the law has left policing in a hopeless position. We now have no mechanism to rid the Met officers who are not fit to hold vetting. Those who cannot be trusted to work with women, or those who cannot be trusted to enter the homes of vulnerable people. It is absolutely absurd that we cannot lawfully sack them.
Well, I want your thoughts on this. Do you know that name, that Wayne Couzens? Even just hearing that man's name, it's just enough, isn't it, to send a shiver down your spine. I'll never forget that guy had the audacity, ladies and gents, to actually appeal his sentence. Do you remember that? You've got to question what actually goes through the mind. How egotistical, how warped must you be, not least to have done that in the first place, but then to have got your tariff and sit there and pontificate to yourself and think, do you know what, it's a really good look for me now to try and get a reduced sentence. I mean, goodness gracious me. Get in touch with me and tell me your thoughts. Coming up after the break, I'll get the reaction to my panel on this story.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, a new study has called calorie-labelled menus in restaurants a cause for concern for those who suffer from eating disorders.
It has indeed. The review found that people with restrictive eating disorders modified their behaviour when presented with the labelled menus and opted for lower-calorie dishes. Well, joining us now is content creator Adelaide Saywell. Adelaide, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, I know that you yourself have struggled with eating disorders over the years, and that is what's led you to kind of advocate using your online platform to try and help other people who might be struggling. Do you want to just talk to us a little bit about your story first of all?
Yeah, so I've had an eating disorder since I was younger, and it's kind of flip-flopped between anorexia, bulimia and binge eating disorder. And it was in 2020 that I was officially diagnosed with anorexia, and I started my recovery on the 1st of May of that year. Recovery was really, really difficult. It took me, I'd say, at least a year or two before I really went into recovery for the right reasons. I was kind of in like a quasi recovery where you're like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And because it was during 2020, it was obviously during COVID, so I didn't have as much support as I could have had, and I had to have therapy, but I had to have it like over Zoom, so they wasn't able to really like talk me through and see me and things like that, which made it really difficult, and not allowed visitors. So it was quite isolating and lonely, which made it even more difficult, and things ended up getting a little bit worse before they started to get better.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry, Jubes and Co, till 7, Ben Habib, Scarlett Maguire alongside me. Let's open this to you, Ben Habib. We've just been hearing there then about these new changes when it comes to policing and the ease at which a police force would be able to get rid of a potential wrong-un.
Well, I think it is a dark day for the police. You know, if we're to trust the police with policing the nation, we have to trust them with policing their own organisation. And actually, the right to dismiss someone for whatever reason from an organisation has to be a much lower bar than a judicial process. A police officer, or indeed someone employed in private enterprise or any other of the public sector bodies, has a duty to fulfil. And their ability to fulfil that duty has to be judged by their superiors. And if the superiors judge them incapable of fulfilling that duty, whatever that duty is, then there has to be a mechanism by which to terminate their employment. This is not, you can't go to trial every time you want to dismiss someone from employment. It just doesn't make any sense. And Mark White said the Labour Party is bringing in a bill to toughen it up, employment law, but actually they're going to toughen it up the wrong way. They're going to make it even more difficult to get rid of employees. And I think it is a complete mess if the police can't sack an individual that they think, amongst their own, who they think isn't fit to do the job and may actually present a danger to the public. And I just want to draw a parallel, if I may quickly, before you move away from me, between what happened today with the police and the Financial Conduct Authority a couple of years ago, with Chris Benodi, who happens to be a Brexiteer and was until then a successful fund manager. Accusations were made against Chris Benodi, none of which I believe were proven, that he had inappropriately behaved with women and done all sorts of things. And the FCA moved to end his ability to do business. They tore his business apart and they put him out of business without even a criminal trial taking place. And yet today, you have the police, who are charged with the responsibility of protecting the public, not being able to dismiss one of their own because, you know, because of the court standing in the way. Human rights standing in the way. It is absolutely absurd. The human rights of the population, yet again, being put second fiddle to the human rights of an individual. And we see that right across the board, of course, you know, with illegal migration, etc. The human rights law of this country desperately needs to be changed.
Can I just correct, Ben, is that what Mark White made clear is that actually the Home Secretary is going to is going to toughen up the employment thing so that it's easier for Mark Rowley and other chief constables to get rid of
But that's not what the Employment Rights Bill that's going through Parliament at the moment does. It makes it more difficult.
Ben, that is what Yvette Cooper's going to do. Mark made it absolutely clear that that's what she's going to do.
What, specifically with the police?
Specifically with the police, because actually it is really important, and particularly with the Metropolitan Police, is that over and over again we have had cases of officers taking advantage of vulnerable women who they go and see, and they might be on drugs, and they might have been people who've had domestic abuse, and actually sexually assaulting them or coercive behaviour. And I think Mark Rowley is absolutely right that he is trying to get rid of people. And this isn't about one person. There are 300 people that the police have got on this, that if you fail your vetting, then they say you failed your vetting, and once you failed your vetting, you can't be a police officer. And it's absolutely right. And can I say that there's something called DBS, which is for people like me, so I've got it. I've been vetted so that I can be on the board of children's charities, that sort of thing. But if you work for, and so the police just look at my criminal record, which I haven't got, but if you work for it, then what the police do is they go into their sort of rather more secret files where you've been accused of a crime but not necessarily found guilty. And that's what happens with these people. And it's really, really important. And what Mark Rowley is trying to do is he is trying to get it so that, as you say, and as Mark White said, he is trying to get it so that we can trust the police, because what the Sarah Everard case showed, but unfortunately there are many, many others, is that the police actually take advantage of their position. Not all of them. There's lots and lots of good police.
What do you mean, take advantage of their position?
Well, because they're a policeman, they can tell you what to do. I mean, that's exactly what he did, wasn't it? Because they're a policeman...
They exploit their position.
They exploit their position, yeah.
One of my viewers, Barry, he's got in touch and says, can you tell Ben Habib is wrong? He says, unfounded allegations against somebody is very different to something having been proven. So I think what Barry is saying, he's slightly concerned that vexatious claims, I could say, oh, Ben Habib, he's done this and he's done that and all the rest of it.
And, I mean, it was an affront to me that on a potentially vexatious claim, I don't know whether it was vexatious or not, when those women accused Chris Benodi of having done stuff, that actually his business was torn apart, his reputation was absolutely destroyed without a criminal trial taking place. But dismissing someone from employment has to be a lower bar than going to court and being found guilty of something. It has to be, particularly if you're in a position of trust. And, where would we be if employers couldn't get rid of employees without going to trial? The right thing to do here is give the police the ability to terminate employment, and then the aggrieved employee can bring a case for compensation or for reinstatement, and they can have it out afterwards. But in the first instance, the employment should be set aside, and then a judicial or tribunal process, as is normally the case, can take place, post-termination.
Benny, you've got it. Benny and Barry, you should set up a band. Benny has got in touch and said, Michelle, I used to respect the police, but now in recent years, I feel like he's saying he feels like he lacks sympathy with them. He feels, his words, that they pander to every work cause whilst persecuting anyone that they perceived to be what he says is right-wing, and that has made him distrust the police. What I would say in response to that, Benny, if I may, is I actually feel sorry for frontline police officers often, because a lot of these policy decisions, strategy decisions, is not coming often from the frontline police officer. It's coming from strategic management, from the bosses, from those layers above. And then the poor souls that risk their lives getting out of 999 calls with goodness only knows what in front of them, risking their life. They don't know if they're going to go home to their kids, their wives, their loved ones at the end of the shift. I feel feel sorry for those guys often because they put themselves at risk for us, and they are impacted by these absurd policies that are coming from management. But you might have a different view. If you do, get in touch and tell me. All views welcome. Coming up later on in the break, we have a lot to discuss. Thatcher, 50 years today. Was she a force for good then or not? Also the details of that deportation flight from yesterday. I've got them. And also, are you a girl? Do you have kids? Grandkids? There's a tribunal that's happening at this moment as we speak, and it'll have significant ramifications for us women. Let's discuss in 2.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Heavy showers and thunderstorms affecting the Adriatic coastline, but elsewhere it should be mostly settled. These heavy showers could produce quite a lot of rain, particularly across southern parts of Croatia, Albania and parts of Greece. Some thunder and lightning mixed in with those too. But as we move our way further west across the Mediterranean, it's largely dominated by high pressure, so largely settled, particularly for Madeira and Tenerife, where we're likely to see the best of the sunshine. Showers continuing for a time before becoming more settled.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we go through the next 24 hours, there's going to be plenty of cloud for many of us, albeit with a touch of frost possible when we get some clearer skies towards the west. Most places, though, under that easterly flow, continuing to push in plenty of cloud and also bringing some outbreaks of mostly light drizzly rain. It will be in the east where these are most frequent. There could even be a bit of sleet, a bit of hill snow perhaps, over the higher ground of northern England and into Scotland as well. Most places, though, staying with the cloudy skies overnight, and that blanket of cloud will stop temperatures dropping a huge amount. But where we get those clearer skies in the west, we may see a touch of frost and perhaps even some fog or freezing fog patches. So in the southwest, there could be some clear breaks to start the day, and with that then some poor visibility issues, but these should gradually clear as we go through the day. A much cloudier story across many other parts, and with that there will be some drizzly rain, a bit damp in places too. Western Scotland perhaps having the best of the clear breaks overnight and therefore the brightest start through tomorrow morning. With that though, a bit of frost around and again some freezing fog patches quite possible. A cloudier story for more central eastern parts of Scotland. Through the day tomorrow, some of the cloud, particularly across eastern areas, is going to be pretty stubborn, so won't really clear, staying grey, and further outbreaks of drizzly rain quite likely. Otherwise, and further west, there should be perhaps a bit more brightness breaking through compared to today. With that, temperatures are likely to be a degree or so higher for many of us. Still a bit of a chilly feel, and if you're stuck under the cloud, it's going to feel even chillier still. As we look ahead to Thursday, and again, a bit more brightness developing, perhaps always most likely towards western parts. Eastern areas staying pretty grey, pretty murky. We do have some wet weather feeding in from the southwest, pushing into parts of Cornwall and also the Republic of Ireland. Otherwise, through the end of the week, it looks like it's going to stay largely cloudy for many of us and also staying chilly. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems on Merseyside on the M6. The lane's closed on the southbound entry slip road at junction 23 at the East Lancashire Road exit where a lorry's broken down. And in South Yorkshire, no change in Sheffield City Centre. All approaches to the Park Square roundabout, including the A61 Sheffield Parkway, they're all shut as this police investigation that started last night continues, causing major disruption on trams through the area. On the M40 in Buckinghamshire, heading north at junction 3 at Loudwater, a car's broken down, causing queues if you're heading up towards High Wycombe. And on the western stretch of the M25, the outside lane's coned off clockwise at junction 14, the Heathrow exit, where a car's broken down. Long queues on the M20 in Kent, London bound. From junction 5 to 4 between the Aylesford and Leybourne exit, a car and a van have collided, so recovery work continues. And on the M5 in Devon, a lane is shut southbound, junction 30 Exeter for emergency bridge repairs. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got Ben Habib, the chairman of the Great British PAC and the former deputy leader of Reform UK, and Scarlett Maguire, the former Labour advisor. Welcome back, everybody. In just a few minutes, I want to talk to you about Margaret Thatcher. 50 years ago today, since she became the leader of the Tories. Was she a force for good or not? Also, there's massive calls now to reunite the right. What would that look like in this new era of reform, and who, if there was to be some kind of merger, who should be the leader of that party? There's a lot to discuss, but before I get on to that, there's a tribunal taking place as we speak that will have potential ramifications for all of us women. So if you've got grandkids, I don't know, nieces, if you're a woman yourself, then this is a story that we should be paying close attention to. It's essentially about an NHS doctor, a male NHS doctor, that's been allowed to use the female changing room. A female nurse has essentially been unhappy about this, and long story short, it's now ended up at a tribunal. Joining me now, I've got LGBT rights activist Peter Tatchell. Good evening to you. This is a conversation that's been happening now for quite a few days. I think we're on something like day 6 or day 7 of this case, and it all centres around should a male, a biological male, who identifies in their words as a transgender woman, be able to access female changing rooms. Your thoughts?
Well, I think it's very unfortunate that this particular case has come so far. It would have been preferable for the two people to sit down, discuss, and come to some agreed compromise. And I think there is a compromise possible. I think there's no doubt that a trans woman should not, in a female changing area, expose their genitals or be in close proximity to other women. They should preferably be in a private locked cubicle where they can change in privacy and where they nor anyone else will be offended or hurt. That would be the solution that I would propose. In this particular case, it is very much a case of one person says one thing, the other says the other. I mean, there was the instance where the nurse did admit that she had raised the issue of the transgender rapist, Elsa Bryson, who of course should have never ever been put in a women's prison. But I think to raise that case in connection with this doctor, who of course operates according to high professional standards, I think that was quite offensive and unnecessary.
Yeah, but this all boils down to the fact that whether or not people are offended is kind of neither here nor there. Many biological women, it's very simple. They don't want to have to get undressed in front of a biological male. Whether you're negotiating about whether or not you see their genitalia is just, quite frankly, with respect, a bit weird. They just don't want to be in that intimate environment with a male, which I think is perfectly reasonable.
I can understand those concerns and sympathise. But I would say, based on the trans women that I know who do use female changing rooms, they change in private cubicles and definitely go to extreme lengths to ensure that no genitalia of any description is visible to other people in that female changing room. That, to me, would be a compromise. Now, I accept that not everyone would accept that, but that is how most trans women deport themselves, with extreme sensitivity towards the feelings of women in those changing rooms. They don't do things that would cause those women offense. And I've asked some of my trans women friends, has there ever been any comeback? And they said, no, we always go into the private cubicle, we change, we may chat when we're fully clothed outside in the common area, but no one's ever raised any objections.
Yeah, but if I was in the common area of a female changing room and I was mid-change and a biological male exited into my space because he'd finished getting dressed, I would be uncomfortable with that. And I understand what you're saying about a separate changing environment, but then they are also available in the male changing room. So I would politely suggest that that might be a more appropriate place for them.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I have some sympathy. And of course, women should not be made to feel uncomfortable. But all I'm saying is that of the, I think about 6 or 7 trans women who I've asked, who do change regularly in female changing rooms, none of them have ever said they've done anything inappropriate. They've never had a complaint. They've never intruded on another woman in the changing room in a state of undress. They've always made sure that they recommend or respect those boundaries and avoid coming out into the changing area, the common changing area, when other women are in a state of undress. I think that's the way the vast majority of trans people behave, but of course there may be some who don't, and I can understand why that might cause distress.
Interesting. Peter Tatchell, thank you for your opinion on that one. We'll follow this tribunal very closely, because if you're someone, you might sit there and go, oh, why is Michelle talking about this again? It's because I believe that single-sex spaces really do matter. If you have to get changed at your place of work, you might be a nurse, you could do any form of anything where you've got to get changed into your uniform. I feel so passionately that we deserve our single-sex spaces, and this tribunal could potentially have interesting ramifications for us all. Let me know what you think about that. But I also want to talk about another woman, Margaret Thatcher. Many of you will have very divided opinions on her. Today marks 50 years since she became the Tory leader. Was she, in your mind, a force for good or not? Ben Habib.
I flew into the United Kingdom. I was born in Karachi, and I flew to the UK for boys' school on the 9th of April 1979, and I think she came into office in May 1979, and she was therefore Prime Minister from when I was 13 until I was about 25. And she was transformative for me. I remember arriving into a country where there had been, massive strikes. Everything was broken. Nothing worked. People were depressed about their ability to get on in life. Aspiration had been completely killed. Wealth creation had been killed. We had become a country dependent on handouts. We only joined the European Economic Community because we had failed in our own minds to succeed as an independent country. And within minutes of taking office, she realised that she had to get Britain working again. And the first thing that she did, which is lost on our current parliamentarians and governing class, was to cut taxes for the rich and for the working classes. She took both income tax rates down, and contrary to popular belief, people think she got inflation under control, then she cut taxes. No, she realised instantly that she had to give the ability to people to make money in order to get this country back up. And we had a fantastic period in the 1980s. She also got rid of the significant number of regulations, obviously the unions, but others, which were holding business back. She liberated business. She actually did for us what Trump is doing for the United States at the moment. And she was an absolutely transformational Prime Minister. Now, did she make mistakes? All people make mistakes. And I think if I were to make a criticism of Maggie, it was that she didn't have a plan for what to do with the parts of the country that were damaged by some of the policies she had to institute to pull us up by our bootstraps. So there was no vision of how to create a new economy for the mining areas, for example.
And that still remains, I would argue.
And I think that was a real problem.
Today.
But Maggie, we need the human spirit to be liberated from 27 years of liberal global socialist governance. We need aspiration back again, it's gone. We need wealth creation back again, it's gone. And we need to give people the ability and the tools by which they can improve their lot. And I'm afraid at the moment we just don't have that in the governing class.
Scarlett? Yeah. There are bits I do agree with Ben about, but I was living in Britain in 1979 when she came in, and I don't recognise this as a country that, was awful and dreadful. I mean, it had problems.
It was pretty bleak, three-day working week.
I think it wasn't in 1979, much earlier, and that was over a miners' strike that failed. The thing about, I think what's important is that for some people, Mrs. Thatcher was really, really good, and for an awful lot of people, I mean, the wealth inequality certainly was a lot larger. But what I really mind is the waste, is that we had North Sea oil. Norway has a sovereign wealth fund, right? Norway is a rich country. Its people are rich. We just wasted that. We privatised industries. We privatised water, and you might hate regulation, but look at what the privatisation of water has. we had the so-called wonderful right to buy. So people bought their council houses very cheap. They sold them on, and now and the councils were not allowed to use that money to build more houses. So our social housing stock went down. I mean, she's a woman that I do admire, right? I mean, I think that she went in, she knew what she was doing. I also think that because she was female, two things happened. One, she was underestimated by both her cabinet and, frankly, Arthur Scargill, who do not see the trap that he walked into. He was
pretty impressive character himself.
He was, yeah, but he underestimated her. But the other thing was that she knew where she was going. And it was, she charmed Europe. I mean, President Mitterrand of France said she had the eyes of Caligula and the mouth of Marilyn Monroe. And she went into Europe and she negotiated. And what we have to remember is she brought us the single market. She negotiated the single market, and she would go in there, as they used to say, with her handbag and get her own way. So she was an indomitable figure, right? But I think that what she left behind was pretty chaotic.
Oh, what she left behind was miles better than what she inherited.
Not for a lot of people.
It absolutely was. I don't buy this notion that the rich got rich and the poor got poorer. The poor may not have got as rich as fast as the rich got richer, but actually the wealth gap...
Talk to the people in those areas where, she just let manufacturing go. She closed the coal pit.
She made mistakes, as I mentioned. She didn't have a kind of post-industrial view of the United Kingdom.
All she was really interested in was financial services, right? And we have great financial services. But actually, Boris Johnson talked about levelling up. We do know there's a real problem in this country. And I'm not old enough to know whether the problem happened before, but certainly she left it terrible, and she did nothing in those coal. I mean, it was really terrible.
I agree, particularly with
it was vindictive what she did.
Well, it
to the
wasn't
miners.
vindictive. She had to do it, but then she had to have a vision and a plan by which to reinvigorate those areas, and that's where I think our politicians so often go wrong. Is they get to base 1, they don't go to base 2, 3, 4, and particularly in, I'm digressing, but in war zones. No, she was a fantastic Prime Minister, and we need another formidable figure who has the ability to energise the vision and the ability to also look at the detailed plan and execute. We don't have that. We need someone like that.
And the Tories have never recovered.
Well, there you go. What's your thoughts? Are you a Maggie fan or not? Lots of you are getting in touch about that tribunal that's happening within the NHS as we speak. Honestly, this is such a big deal if you're a female, if you've got daughters, granddaughters, if you're a woman yourself. The outcome of this could really change things if you are somebody that's on my side of the fence anyway. I do not want to have to get undressed in front of a male, period. Full stop. I will follow that tribunal with interest coming up after the break. There's much we need to discuss, including some breaking news. I'll see you in 2.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
5 years ago now, we developed this campaign called Regifting Beauty. And Regifting Beauty is about giving back to those that are in less fortunate situations than the majority of us. And I was coming across people that were receiving gifts at Christmas. You know how many gifts we receive? Gift sets, items, bath bombs, all of these things that we don't necessarily use. For myself, they sit in the bathroom cupboard all year round. So I was thinking of a way how we can make that better, put that to better purpose. And we developed this campaign 5 years ago called Regifting Beauty. And it's where people can donate unwanted toiletries, sanitary items, skincare, perfumes. And we work with different charities around the country, and they will re-gift them to survivors of domestic abuse. And for years now, it's only really been focused around women. There hasn't really been a male focus. So Ben and I were having conversations, and we were thinking, well, and I was getting comments throughout the years of doing it, saying, why are men excluded from this? Surely it should be applicable to men too. I mean, in the UK, over 700,000 men are suffering with domestic abuse on an annual basis. And a lot of that goes unreported. And there's over 2 million people in the UK that do suffer from some form of domestic abuse, be it physical or psychological, and it's an important topic that we should be discussing. So this campaign is about providing something that may seem trivial, but it restores some level of dignity And I think that's so important when survivors are just trying to regain aspects of their life. Something so small that maybe sitting in your bathroom cupboard that you're not using could go to such better use. So this year we're launching the Regifting Beauty, the Turnaround Edition, about turning around moments in life and allowing people to have those turnaround moments, which also plays on Ben's, song, Turnaround.
Gotta turn
it fits in nicely with that.
Which I'll be on with you.
For the remix,
Still fitting in nicely, isn't it?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Jubes and Co. Till 7. Ben Habib, Scarlett Maguire remain alongside me. Welcome back. Now, of course, we were discussing the situation about Trigger Me Timbers. If you don't know what that is, where have you been? It is, of course, a WhatsApp group that's been set up. We've had two MPs basically suspended from the Labour Party because of some of the posts that they had made. Well, it's just been confirmed now that the Labour Party have indeed suspended more people. 11 Labour councillors have been suspended by the party after essentially they were found to be in that same group that Andrew Gwynn was in. The councillors, they're apparently from Tameside and Stockport, and a Labour Party spokesperson basically said they've done an investigation and a group of these councillors have been administratively suspended from the Labour Party. They've gone on to say as soon as this group was brought to our attention, an investigation was essentially launched. I've got to say, though, that claim has been disputed because we reported yesterday, we discussed it on my show, that actually people were saying that they flagged this WhatsApp group a long time ago, over a year ago in some cases. So there is dispute about whether or not swift action has indeed followed. But what do you think of these new suspensions?
Well, I mean, it has to happen. I cannot believe that, it's appalling what Andrew Gwynn said. I don't know what these 11 councillors have said because we haven't, we don't know, but one assumes that it was all in that vein. But I also think they're total morons. I mean, what on earth are you doing being on a WhatsApp group when you're in a position of responsibility and saying that sort of thing? I just cannot understand why people think that WhatsApp groups are private. It is beyond me.
Because I think that people are getting people going into public office, they're getting carried away with themselves. They've got this ego thing and they seem to think that they're superior. This is my opinion. They seem to think that they're superior to the constituents, to the voters. And I think they therefore think we can say what we want, we can do what we want because we're this kind of upper echelon. What do you make of it?
I completely agree with that. I mean, there's a complete disconnect, isn't there, as we know, between those who govern us and the people. And the sense of fulfilling a duty to the people, being in politics because you actually want to deliver the country into a better place, which by definition means you've got to work for the people. That seems to have gone out of office. Office now is almost like the preserve of the elite, and actually once you get it, it's a sort of gravy train that they all cherish, which is why I think, partly why I think the country is in such difficulties. But, you know, you look at what was said on the WhatsApp group, actually you see parliamentarians in the Labour Party saying basically the same thing in a more sophisticated way in the open. I mean, I would say the Prime Minister is guilty of two-tier criminal justice, getting up and categorising everyone as far right, for example. You know, it's the same thing as what was going on in the WhatsApp group. It was just delivered in a different way. I think the entire lot of bloody awful. Sorry.
Look, moral of the story is if you want to be in public office, don't let your ego run away with you and don't be thick. Basically, it's really not difficult to be, to know not to be doing these kind of things on WhatsApp groups, is it? Anyway, look, yesterday we showed you all that footage of those deportation flights. Lots of you got in touch. It was about Labour's new policy, obviously. Lots of you got in touch going, details, Michelle, who are they, where are they going, what's it cost? Well, we've got some of those details. Now, apparently it was a privately chartered flight. It had 47 Albanians on board, plus about 150 security guards. They flew to Albania. Estimated costs are said to be around £1 million. Ben Habib.
So I'm amazed by the cost, but what I would say, just one thing I want to point out, by the way, before the Prime Minister takes all credit for the Albanian deportations, that was a deal that Rishi Sunak put in place, the ability to deport people to Albania, albeit with a payment if necessary. And so he's just going along with the plan, actually, that the Conservative Party had already put in place. But on the cost thing, it costs us around £50,000 plus to keep an illegal migrant in the country. It costs us about the same amount of money to incarcerate someone for criminal behaviour. So the cost to the Exchequer is vast once we've got criminality in the country, and I include illegal migrants in that. So the cost of £22,000 a head to deport them, actually, even if it's way too much, is much better than having them here. I remember when President Trump said he was going to detain and deport every illegal migrant in the United Kingdom. Some clever lefty paper came out with an estimate of $80 billion being the cost for it, and therefore saying that's an impractical sum to pay. I would say it was value for money. $80 billion to deport 10 million people who broke the law to get into the United States is exactly the right thing to be doing. And if we've got to spend a pro rata amount to do the same thing in the United Kingdom, we should do it. In the long run, the country will be in a much better place. So I applaud every criminal, foreign criminal who's deported. I applaud that deportation, and I would go further and I would say every single illegal migrant in this country should be detained and deported, and we should also have programs, consensual programs for the repatriation of all the excess immigration we've had over the last few years.
Scarlett?
Ben always takes things and sort of runs with the money. Yeah, I mean that's what it costs. You have to, when you've got 47 criminals, you have to have, I think having 3 people per person with them, so that you're putting, is perfectly reasonable. To have a plane load that you then have to charter, which is going to cost money. That is the cost, and that's what this government said it would do when people came out of jail, particularly, and Albania is very easy. So yeah, I mean that's what it is. But I mean there's an awful lot of other deportations going on at the moment. I mean there are a lot of.
I don't think so, Scarlett.
Oh, well, a few thousand, Ben. A few thousand more.
We're getting thousands a day.
A few
coming in.
Sometimes we call them refugees. They're not all illegal.
They're all illegal migrants.
Yeah, but we've got to say as well, a huge number of these so-called deportations, they're basically voluntary returns, as we've just been touching upon there, where we're essentially paying people up to $3,000 in some cases when they say, I want to go home, is a couple of grand to help you on your way.
But this is actually busting illegal employment and things like that.
Well, there you go. You can have the final say on that. You're really divided about Margaret Thatcher. So many of you getting in touch. She did have a plan after the miners' strike. She introduced enterprise zones, says Bob. Look at things like Nissan. I remember her as Maggie, the milk snatcher, says Dorothy. Chris says she saved the Falklands and I love her. David basically says I live in the northeast and we've never really recovered from her policies. Jill, you're a harsh woman. You say I'm 72 and that witch is the only person in my whole life I can say that I absolutely hated. Blimey. Lots of you get it. Brian says she was absolutely brilliant in spitting image, she says. And Anthony says, Michelle, look at our health minister now. People will have to share public toilets with llamas. Next. Goodness me, that's all I've got time for. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
we'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we go through the next 24 hours, there's going to be plenty of cloud for many of us, albeit with a touch of frost possible when we get some clearer skies towards the west. Most places, though, under that easterly flow, continuing to push in plenty of cloud and also bringing some outbreaks of mostly light drizzly rain. It will be in the east where these are most frequent. There could even be a bit of sleet, a bit of hill snow perhaps, over the higher ground of northern England and into Scotland as well. Most places, though, staying with the cloudy skies overnight, and that blanket of cloud will stop temperatures dropping a huge amount. But where we get those clearer skies in the west, we may see a touch of frost and perhaps even some fog or freezing fog patches. So in the southwest, there could be some clear breaks to start the day, and with that then some poor visibility issues, but these should gradually clear as we go through the day. A much cloudier story across many other parts, and with that there will be some drizzly rain, a bit damp in places too. Western Scotland perhaps having the best of the clear breaks overnight and therefore the brightest start through tomorrow morning. With that though, a bit of frost around and again some freezing fog patches quite possible. A cloudier story for more central eastern parts of Scotland. Through the day tomorrow, some of the cloud, particularly across eastern areas, is going to be pretty stubborn, so won't really clear, staying